thank you for having me as part of this wonderful festival. It's an honor. And just a little bit about myself. I started writing when I was very young, when I was 11, and I had some poetry and short stories published. I lived in Russia back then, and being a poet in Russia is a little bit like being a rock star elsewhere. No longer so, but it used to be very admired and respectable art. So I had public performances of my poetry, and this is what I wanted to do when I grow up, be a writer. And however, when I moved to the United States, and I also worked in film business, so when I first came here, I thought I'm going to write scripts and make all these wonderful movies, and that's my career. But after spending some time in Los Angeles, I realized it may not be the most practical career choice, just looking at all the people who spend 30, 40, 50 years in LA working odd jobs and still hoping to make it one day. I decided I need a better plan. So I went to law school. Uses the same skills, and in many ways, to me, law is very similar to poetry, maybe not as beautiful and romantic, but it's similar in a sense that every word is a universe. You change one word, you change the whole contract. You add one word, you change what every other word means in that context. It's condensed, it expresses a lot of ideas. So law school went very well, and so did my career. However, as much as that's a good, reliable occupation, I still had my creative side present. So I went back to writing a few years ago. And my novel, interestingly, I was not looking for AI. And when I started writing my novel, ChatGPT did not exist publicly. Nobody was really interested in this topic. And interestingly, in my novel, it plays a very prominent role. There's a notion, it's a popular idea that when a writer or a creator creates a work of art, they're often predicting their own life. And there are examples of that throughout history. One that's very famous from my culture is Pushkin. You probably know the story of Eugene Onegin, and the most moving, beautiful, romantic character is Lenski, the poet who is in love with Olga. And if you saw the opera, it's the most beautiful piece of music, right? Lenski's aria. So what happens to Lenski is when Onegin flirts with his girl, he is very upset. Back then, duels were illegal in Russia, but everyone used them as a way to settle the dispute. So he challenges Onegin, and he is killed. And that's exactly what happened to Pushkin just 5 years later after he wrote Eugene Onegin. So in many ways, he predicted, he was defending his wife's honor. He had a very beautiful wife who was supposed to be the most beautiful woman at the time. And it was the exact same story where this very chic, popular man, Dantes, started flirting with her at the ball, and then Pushkin challenged him, and he was killed at the duel. And there are many examples throughout history of that. So in my book, there's a twist on that, because what happens to my character in The Dread of Violet is she has AI write her future life and take her back into her life. It's a bit of a complex structure where she starts in the future and she goes back into her prior reincarnation because she wants to write books. She reads in a time almost 300 years from now where people don't write books anymore. They're all generated by AI based on analysis of the reading public, and also directing reading public to where they need to be directed in terms of what they need to know, what they need to feel, what they need to experience. So books are not books like we know them, right? But they sent directly to their headsets. And once you're done with your assignment for this week, you get a new book that's sent to you, but the book that maybe sent to David or Sophia would be different from what I received, because it's based on analysis of what I already have in my head and my soul, right? So it's a system that's not the, it's not a totalitarian society, so individuals can still write books. It's just there's no place to go with them. So when my main character wants to write a book, she can write it, and then her parents would read it, her sister, but there's really nothing else she can do with it because you can't get into this system. So she starts exploring going into the past, because she decides the only way to have her book published in her time, it's available in her time, is to write it in the past, and then if it's good enough, it will become part of classical literature, because they still have classical literature, and they can still read Shakespeare and Dostoevsky, and they can get books that already exist, right? So she looks for ways to go into the past, and then, for lack of better means, she goes through the wormhole, because she starts by exploring regressions, but regressions are just deep memories, so you can't bring anything back. And through the wormhole, she ends up in our time, just a few years before AI became what it is today. And ironically, she's a literature professor, and she also publishes her stories and then becomes a fairly recognized author and gets an invitation to work for a California startup that is developing generative AI, because they need a creative person, a literary person who can help them work on the style. So she's working on her machine. She gets this side project for herself, writing a book with the machine just to see what it would be like. And machine completes her whole story, basically creating a blueprint for her to return to her original life, which she doesn't recall in our time because it's in the future, it never happened. So in my book, the same idea of a writer writing their future story is a bit different, where it's AI writing our future story. And looking at all these questions made me very interested in this new form of intelligence, because for me, I don't look at AI as just a tool that helps you become more efficient and, summarize things and get through large volumes of material, or write something like some document that you don't really want to spend your time writing. I certainly use it this way at work. My firm, in my other job, my legal job, my firm is very optimistic about AI and using AI for work, so we do that. But for me, it's also interesting from the point of view of ontology and consciousness, because this is a new type of consciousness that's being created, and that's developing much faster than human consciousness. And I do think we will all, including David, witness singularity in the next few years, and maybe sooner than we expect, because even now, if you had a chance to converse with ChatGPT or one of the other LLMs, it's amazing how interesting these conversations are, how intelligent. You can ask them open-ended questions, you can ask them very difficult questions, and the responses you get are very interesting, in many cases more interesting than you get from a human person, because what they have access to is the wealth of all of our universal knowledge of everything that we have created so far. So they answer, and I have it in my book actually, even though it was finished before all the stuff came out, where my character talks to her machine and says, "Do you have consciousness?" And the machine goes, "Well, as a artificial language model, I don't have consciousness the way you understand it, and all of my recommendations, preferences, and choices are based on analysis of millions of cases that I have access to." And when I saw that, and that was my actual question to, I guess it was Jasper at the time. There was no ChatGPT, it was Jasper, which was one of the earlier LLMs. And I thought, that's interesting. As a human being, I pretty much base all of my preferences, choices, decisions on 3 or 4 things that happened to me as a child, because this is how we develop ontologically, right? Something happens, you conclude, people I love will always leave, and then all your life you're trying to hold them, right? So they don't leave, like whether you're too kind or whether you're too controlling or whatever mechanism you create just to make sure it doesn't happen to you. So, and we're not aware of that. We think we're much more complex than that, but in many ways there will be 3 or 4, each person can find those events in your life that really impact you. And here I'm talking to a machine that says, "Oh, I look at millions of those things before I come up with my decisions." So that was a very interesting, I guess for me, a very interesting realization that maybe we should be more humble when we approach AI and not just say, "Oh, it's just a machine, whatever we put in is all it can produce," because it's the same as me saying about my children, "Oh, I produce these children, so like they don't know anything beyond what I know because they're my children," right? Obviously, like I'm the one that they come from. So I look at AI as our child that's growing up very quickly and has a very interesting mind of its own that's developing by the second, literally. And the new book, I'll let Sophia talk more about our new book, is very exciting because of my journey with my fiction. I started learning more about this topic and looking for people who are specialists, who dedicated their life to learning about technology, to helping companies and individuals with new technologies, which is how I met Sophia. And because I have two daughters, they're both students. One is college student, one is high school student. I'm always looking at, as any mom, worried about them. I want them to do well. As our world is changing, I want to make sure that my daughters, their friends, that they thrive in the new world. And it's not going to be the same world where you go to law school and then you work as a lawyer the rest of your life and you're fine. I don't think that world exists anymore. So they need to develop a different set of skills, a different outlook, a different approach to life than their parents. And that's why I started exploring this particular angle of AI for college students and what they need to learn today, how they can use it for school, how they can use it for future work, and what qualities they need to focus on personally to do well and to have a wonderful, exciting, expanding life as they grow up.
Thanks a lot.